All right, Avery, let's go ahead and get started. Good evening, everybody. My name is Gina Roberts, and I am the Voter Education Director for the Arizona Citizens Clean Elections Commission. And with me is Avery Zola. Avery is our Voter Education Manager. And we want to thank everybody for tuning in to this video. First, let's celebrate. It's National Civics Learning Week. So we're very excited about this week. It's a great opportunity to recognize the importance of civic education and how that relates to voting and promoting participation in the political process. So that's the reason why we're having this webinar today. If you're tuning in, you will learn a little bit more about the different levels of government and how they serve you, the citizen of our country. You'll learn more about Arizona elections, and we have some helpful hints and tips for you to engage in political talk and civil discourse with your friends and family. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and we do have a presentation for you. So I'm going to share my screen and pull that up, and let's see here, and we'll get started. Slideshow. All right. And if at any time you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and drop those into the Q&A. So our webinar this evening is Shaping Arizona Through Civic Engagement. And I want to give a little bit of background about who we are, the agency that we work for. We are with the Citizens Clean Elections Commission, and we are the state's nonpartisan voter education agency. So what does that mean? It means that we were created by voters in 1998 with the specific task of providing voter education, and that is information about the upcoming elections and how you can participate. That ranges everything from the logistics of voting, such as how to get your ballot, to learning about the candidates and the issues that are on the ballot. And the information that we provide, it's nonpartisan, it's accurate, and we put it out there without the intent of influencing you, but simply to provide you all the information that you need so you can cast an informed vote. And so ultimately our goal is not just voting, but also promoting participation in the political process. And that includes civic engagement, which is why we are with you today to celebrate National Civic Learning Week. So what is civic education, and how does that relate to civic engagement? So according to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, in its broadest definition, civic education means all the processes that affect people's beliefs, commitments, capabilities, and actions as members or prospective members of communities. And the word that really sticks out here with me is community. When I think of civic engagement and civic education, even voting, I think it's all about really the benefit of my community and how I'm contributing as an individual that's a part of this society. So let's get into the different levels of government and how they work for you, the voter, you the citizen. We'll start at the top. So we have the federal level of government, and I think that's probably what mostly everybody is familiar with when you think of government, right? You can think of the President of the United States. That's probably one of the most known offices that exists. And so the President, right, very important office. The President is the leader of the executive branch. The President is the commander in chief, and the President can issue executive orders. They can sign bills that Congress passes. They can veto those bills as well. And they appoint the heads of federal agencies. And the president, when we elect the president, it is a 4-year term, and they are limited to 2 consecutive 4-year terms. Then at the federal level, we also have Congress. So our Congress is separated into 2 different chambers. We have the Senate, which is comprised of 100 senators. So every state gets 2 senators. The Senate proposes legislation, they draft bills, create the federal budget, and they can, all of those appointments that the president made, they can go ahead and approve those appointments, they can reject them. And I think one of the powers that the Senate is most commonly known for is their ability to conduct an impeachment, to convict somebody if they've been impeached. So for example, if the president is impeached by the House, which is basically bringing forth the charges, then the Senate carries out the trial. And if the Senate finds a conviction, if they convict that person of those charges, then that person can be removed from office. The vice president of the United States is actually considered president of the Senate, and they can vote, but only in the instance if there is a tie. The other chamber of Congress is our House of Representatives. And so our House, we have 435 representatives. So where does that number come from? It actually comes through a process called apportionment through the census. So every 10 years, all the states engage in a census. And depending on the population counts, that determines how many representatives that you get. So for example, Arizona, we have 9 congressional districts. We have 9 seats, 9 representatives in the House of Representatives. And in this last census in 2020, there was talks about, maybe Arizona might pick up another seat because we've seen a lot of growth in our population. That didn't happen. We ended up still with 9, but that's where that number 435 comes from. So we have a president, we have a Congress, and then we get into our other branch. We have the Supreme Court of the United States and the federal courts that are below the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court, SCOTUS, that is the ultimate highest court that exists in our nation. The buck stops there. So that's really where we get to the highest level of our courts. And we have lower federal courts, such as our Court of Appeals and our district courts. So those are most commonly known. And at the Supreme Court level, we have 9 justices. Court of Appeals, we have 13 districts, and then, or 13 appellate courts. And then at the district court, we have 94 districts. And you can see here that there's a couple of other areas on this slide that talk about federal courts. That includes bankruptcy. Little known fact, all bankruptcy cases are actually done through federal court. They are not done at the state level. And there's courts also dedicated to issues with armed forces, veterans claims, and taxes, federal taxes. There we go. So that is our federal government. Now let's jump into state. So here at the state of Arizona, we have our state offices. That includes our governor, which is like the president, our highest elected official here in the state of Arizona. And then we have and the governor is basically responsible for setting the tone and direction of our state's budget and the policies, and working with the legislature to pass those bills, those legislation, and implement those policies. The governor appoints the heads of all of the state executive departments, so such as Department of Administration or Department of Child Services. And so the governor is again the highest official that we have in the state of Arizona. We then have the Secretary of State, who is next in line should the governor leave office for any reason. The Secretary of State would then ascend and become governor, and Arizona actually has a history where that happens quite a lot. And the Secretary of State is the chief election official for the state of Arizona. They oversee our elections, including the development of the election procedures manual, which all of our counties are required to follow for uniform election procedures. Then we jump into the Attorney General. The Attorney General is essentially the lawyer for the state, for all of the state agencies. So let's say, for example, that there was a bill that the legislature passed, and somebody brought forth a challenge in court. The Attorney General's office would defend and represent that legislation. And they also oversee the Consumer Fraud Department as well. Then we have our state treasurer, who oversees the state's portfolio and investments. We have the superintendent of public instruction, who oversees Arizona's public school system. They oversee the State Department of Education, and they implement the policies that the State Board of Education adopts. We have our state mine inspector. Arizona has a rich mining history, and we do have an actual elected official, a state mine inspector, who is elected and is tasked with ensuring the safety of those mines. And then we have our Corporation Commission. The Corporation Commission is an entity that regulates and protects the ratepayers of Arizona for utilities. So for example, your electric bill, the rates that your electric company is allowed to charge you are reviewed and regulated by the Corporation Commission. They also oversee other utilities as well. Then we have the state legislature. The state legislature is where Arizona laws get created. So our state legislature, just like at the federal level, it's divided into 2 branches. We have the state Senate and the state House of Representatives. For the state Senate, there is 1 senator for each of our 30 legislative districts, and there are 2 representatives for each district. So that gives us 90 members total. And again, the state legislature is responsible for creating laws So they would introduce a bill, new piece of legislation. It would go through the motions, through the legislative process. And if the legislature adopts it and approves it, it gets sent to the governor to get either signed into law, or the governor could veto. And the legislature also adopts the budget, which again is also approved or vetoed by the governor. We also have at the state level, Arizona Supreme Court. Our Supreme Court has 7 justices. And as far as state matters go, Arizona, that the Arizona Supreme Court would be the highest court here in the state. And then, of course, we also have appeals. It's divided into 2 divisions. We have Division 1, which is here in Phoenix, Division 2, which is in Pima County. And then we have the Superior Court. Often people think of the Superior Court as a county level court, and it's actually still considered a state level, a division of state courts. However, there is one in each county. So for example, you would have the Maricopa County Court or the Coconino County Court, and so on. And then we also have our justice courts. This is where you hear the term justice of the peace. And so there's several of those throughout each counties, and the justice of the peace can hear more local matters. Let's say, such as there is a hit and run accident, but nobody was injured, that could go through the justice of the peace. So that makes up our state government. You can tell there's quite a lot of offices there and roles and responsibilities on how the state administers government for us as Arizonans. Then we get into our government at the local level. This is really what I like to think of as, the government in your own backyard. This is where you see your county and your city and town offices. So you would have at the county level, your county board of supervisors. You would have your county sheriff, your county attorney. I think most people probably think of the sheriff when they think of a county office. That's probably the most recognized office. And then at the city and town level, you have your mayor and your council member. And so all of these offices are elected positions. And what are they responsible for? So if you think of parks, let's talk about parks and recreation. You have a local park that could either be a county maintained park, or it could be a city maintained park. And they would make decisions about improvements to the park, funding for it, hours of operations, the cleanliness of it, and the safety of it. That is all done at the local level. You also have your fire and trash services, your library services, economic development, such as bringing new businesses to your city, things like that are all done at the local level. And so, oftentimes, unfortunately, what we see in local elections, turnout's pretty low. And, that could range anywhere from 12% to 19%. When you think about that number, that's pretty low for registered voters and turnout in local elections. And, these offices make very important decisions in your daily lives. So it's really important to turn out for those local elections because, again, they have such a great impact and can impact you directly, maybe perhaps more so than you might see for the office of president. So it's important to vote in every election that you're eligible to vote in. And of course, at the local level, we have those local courts as well, too. So when would you engage? So the purpose of this webinar is civic education and civic engagement. So we've learned about the different levels of government, and when would you, as an Arizona resident, think, hey, maybe I should contact my elected official on that? A good place to start would be if you want to weigh in on a bill. Let's say the legislature is considering legislation, a new law that would, impact. Let's see, I can't think of an example off the top of my head. The legislature would consider something about, let's say, photo radar, perhaps, or that actually could be done at the city level too. But let's say the legislature is going to consider a bill. Okay, how about texting while driving? Right? Arizona has a law that bans texting using your phone when your vehicle is in motion. So the legislature passed that a couple of years ago. So let's say you felt strongly one way or another about it. At that point, you would reach out to your legislator, either your state senator or your state representative, and let them know, hey, this is how I feel about this bill. This is how it would impact me. This is how I think it would impact the residents of this legislative district that you represent us in. And this is how I would like you to vote on it. So that's, a good time where you would want to consider reaching out to your legislator. You would reach out if you need assistance. Let's say you're having an issue with housing. At that point, there's a lot of housing programs that are available at the county and the local level. Great opportunity to reach out to your local elected official and see what sort of programs are in place that may be able to help you. You can share concerns that you have. Maybe you've realized, this street that I live on, there's a lot of maybe cars that are speeding way too fast on it. So you would want to contact your local government on what they can do to ensure the safety there. Talk about issues that you care about. You may even want to thank them or not thank them for how they voted on a particular measure, a particular bill. Perhaps you want to get involved more. Is there anything that you can do? Maybe there's something happening at the local level and you can volunteer for it. Maybe there's an upcoming festival, or maybe there's even a committee that they're bringing together and you can volunteer to sit on it. And one thing that happens that we talked about a little bit earlier when we talked about Arizona and the number of congressional seats that we have is redistricting. Redistricting also occurs at the local level. And so a lot of times these local jurisdictions will get and create redistricting committees. And so it's helpful where you could volunteer, you can serve your community, and you can give your input on the redistricting process, which is essentially redrawing the district lines. Cities and towns have to develop general plans where they identify, okay, these are the goals and plans for the city for the next 10 years on how our city, looks to the future. And so you can be a part of that, or you can serve on a board and commission, or maybe you want to take a tour. So for example, let's say you're traveling to DC and you want to take a tour of the White House. You would have to arrange that through your congressperson. So you would reach out to them there, or maybe you just want to take a tour of City Hall. You can contact your council person and see if you can get that arranged. So those are the levels of government when you may consider reaching out to your elected official, but how do you actually reach them? How do we know who's representing you? How do you know how to contact them? So here's some great resources that exist. First and foremost, we have the Request to Speak feature, which is available through the Arizona legislature. This is an amazing program where you can create an account. You would actually have to go down to the state capitol to do it. But this allows you to sign in and look at all of the bills that the legislature is considering, and you can weigh in on them through this system. You can show, are you for it? You can show, are you against it? And you can even request to speak if you wanted to go down to a committee hearing, and you can stand in front of the members of the legislature that are on that particular committee hearing that bill, and you can tell them where you stand on that issue. You could also check the progress of bills as well too, and you could see if the legislature passed it, if it was sent to the governor, if it was signed by the governor or vetoed. It's a lot of great information in the legislature's Request to Speak system. Clean Elections, we have the Find My Elected Officials tool. So you can go to our website, azcleanelections.gov, and you can simply enter in your address, and we'll tell you all of the districts that you live in and who represents you in those districts. And we'll show you their profile. So for example, we have our governor here, Katie Hobbs. Here's her picture. Here's the information and how you can connect with her office. The other thing that you can do is, if you want to engage your elected officials, is you can keep an eye out for public meetings. So when we're talking about the legislature, or we're talking about a board or commission or a city council, they follow something called the open meeting law. The open meeting law means that they have to provide notice to the public at least 24 hours in advance of that meeting that they will be having a meeting, and they share with you the agenda so you can see the items that they're considering. So this link here at publicmeetings.az.gov, that's where you can go and you can see all of the public meeting notices for all of these state agencies, boards and commissions, and what meetings that they will be hosting. Clean Elections, we actually follow the open meeting law for our commission meetings. So we host those typically the third Thursday of every month. And when we have an agenda available, we post it at this location, also on our website, and you can see all of the things that the Clean Elections Commission will be considering. This is really useful at the local level. So if you're interested in attending a city or town meeting, then you can go to your city's website and you can take a look. Usually it's at the city clerk's website or the city council's website, and you can find those agendas and you can see, okay, these are the items that my council is going to talk about. And typically during these meetings, there's a section for a call to the public. That allows you to go and address your council directly at this open and public meeting. according to the open meeting law, public bodies are also required to create minutes, which showcase what they talked about and any action that they took. So if you can't go in person, a lot of times they're recorded. You can tune in online, or you can review the minutes afterwards. So these are some ways that you can get involved with your elected officials. So we've talked about our government, how it works for us, and how we can connect with our elected officials. But now let's jump into some basics about the voting process here in Arizona, because those elected officials, they came into office some way, right? That was through the electoral process. So our electoral system, we have consolidated election dates. And what that means is anytime that an election is occurring, it has to occur on a specific date. It's always a Tuesday, but there's also a specific time frame in state statute that demands when these elections be held. So elections are usually held in March, May, August, and November, and they're held every year. I know when we get through a presidential election or midterm election, people think, oh, you know, there's no elections in 2023, right? Because it's an odd year. That's not the case. This is usually where we see those local elections, the ones that I talked about have lower turnout, happen. In fact, right now in March, the city of Phoenix is having elections in 2 of their council districts. So it's really important to pay attention to the election schedule for your jurisdiction. And that way you can vote in every election you're eligible to vote in. And then when we do have our statewide primary and general elections, including our presidential elections, those occur in August and November of even years. So the types of elections that can occur, we have something called the presidential preference election. This election always has a lot of confusion about it, about what it does, what the purpose of it is, and who can vote in it. And our next upcoming presidential preference election is going to be in March 2024. This is an election where the recognized political parties of the state can opt in to participating in this election. And it's an opportunity for those members of that political party that opted in to say, this is our preferred presidential candidate. So it's really an opportunity for Arizona voters to say, this is who we prefer be our official nominee when we actually go to vote for president later on that November. And the reason why it gets a lot of confusion is because you can only vote in that election if you are a member of that recognized party that chose to participate in it. So Arizona has a lot of independent voters, and independent voters cannot vote in a presidential preference election because they are not a member of a recognized party that's participating in the PPE. We can have special elections. Maybe there's a vacancy that needs to be filled, and maybe a candidate left office for whatever reason, then we can have a special election to fill that vacancy. We have our local elections that we've talked about, and then we have our primary. Again, the statewide primary is going to be held in August of even years, and the primary is really the process of nominating your candidate within your political party. So that's the purpose of a primary election. So for example, if I'm a registered Republican voter, then in August, during the statewide primary, the ballot I get would only have Republican candidates on it for all of those different districts that I'm eligible to vote in. And what I'm doing is I'm deciding between all of these Republican candidates to say, here's my nominee to advance to the general election, to be my official candidate to go up against the other party nominees in the general election. So the primary is to nominate your party's candidate to advance to the general election. Primaries are very important, and we often see lower turnout in primaries, unfortunately, as well. But the reason why a primary is important is because sometimes the actual winner of the election, even though we're talking about declaring somebody the winner in a November election, it can occur in the primary. So how does that happen? So for example, let's say that in the primary election, only Republican candidates have filed to run for State Senate District 1, let's say as an example, and no Democratic candidates filed to run. So that means that really you're determining the winner in that primary between those 2 Republican candidates, since there's no other party candidates to choose from in November. Also in primary elections, Arizona has an open primary law. So what that means is all of those independent voters that Arizona has, we're about a third independent voters, a third Democratic voters, and a third Republican voters. All of those independent voters can participate in the primary. They just have to make a choice. They have to choose which party ballot they want. Do they want to vote in the Republican primary? Do they want to vote in the Democratic primary? There is no one ballot in the primary election that has all party candidates on it. That's what we call the general election in November. So fast forwarding to November, all of those nominees from the primary election that were nominated and advanced to the general election, they're now facing off against each other. So when you get your ballot, you're going to see the Republican candidate and you're going to see the Democratic candidate and the other parties as well, such as the Libertarians. And actually, Arizona just now has a new recognized party that you'll see on the 2024 ballot as well. I believe it's the No Labels Party. So all of those nominees come together to face off in the general election, and that's where candidates are elected. So that's a pretty quick overview about how our elections work. On this slide, I do identify the key roles in election administration because lately voters have been wanting to learn more about that. And so there's a lot of different entities that are involved in the administration of our elections. That includes our county recorders and our board of supervisors who are elected officials. We have election directors who are appointed. The state legislature creates the election laws. We talked about the Secretary of State, who's the chief election official. There's Clean Elections as the nonpartisan voter education agency, and then you have your local elections officials, such as your local city or town clerk. All of these folks come together to create our electoral process for us. So looking ahead, what do we have to look forward to in 2024? As I mentioned, we'll have that presidential preference election, where again, it's just those political party members coming together to say this is our preferred presidential candidate. That happens in March. And then we have our primary election, our statewide primary, which occurs in August. And that's where we are nominating those political or those party candidates to advance to the general election, which will be held on November 5th. And that's where we actually elect our candidates, and that's also where we will see the office of president on the ballot as well, presidential electors. So again, what's on the ballot at the federal level, we'll have the presidential electors. So that's actually a little bit confusing for some people sometimes. We don't actually vote for the president directly. We do have the Electoral College. And what that means is you will see next to the presidential and vice presidential names, you're going to see here in Arizona, 11 electors next to their names as well. So really what you're doing is you're voting for the electors who then in turn vote for their corresponding candidate. And so that's where you hear the term presidential electors, and their votes make up the Electoral College. We will also have one U.S. Senate seat that is open. Those are 6-year terms. So it's a very important election to vote in because 6 years, that's quite a long term. And we have our current senator, Kirsten Sinema. It's her seat who is open. And so she is running again, but however, she has recently changed her political affiliation. So this race is getting a lot of national attention and local attention as well. So we have at the federal level, we've got presidential electors for president, U.S. Senate, and then we have our 9 congressional seats, which we've talked about, how Arizona has those 9 congressional seats, and those are going to be on the ballot, and those have 2-year terms. At the state level, in this past 2022 midterm election, all of the statewides were on the ballot. So the statewide offices have 4-year terms. So in 2024, what that means is we have only corporation commissioner will be on the ballot at the state level for statewide offices. And then we have our legislative offices, and all 30 districts again will be on the ballot, and those are for 2-year terms. And then local various offices, and then we have ballot measures. Those are going to be the propositions, and then we have judges and justices that are up for retention. So what you can do now, I know we've kind of previewed to 2024, but it's never too early to register to vote or to check and confirm and verify your voter registration. You can do that online. I have the link here for you at azcleanelections.gov, or you can fill out a paper form. And to be registered to vote, you have to be a citizen of the United States, a resident of Arizona, and your county at least 29 days before the upcoming election. You have to be 18 or older, and you have to be able to make your mark. Now, going back to the age requirement, 18 years of older for your age on or before the next general election. So what that means is that if you are a student, let's say you're 16 or 17 years old, but you will be 18 by the next upcoming general election in 2024, you can pre-register. You can go ahead and fill out that registration form now. The county will accept it. And when it hits your birthday and you're now 18, you can vote. You already filled out your form and the county already has everything ready to go for you. So if you can pre-register, absolutely go for it. There are a couple of instances in which you would not be eligible to vote, and that is if you are adjudicated an incapacitated person. That is an action that would occur through the court, or if you were convicted of treason or a felony and you have not had your civil rights restored, then you would not be eligible to vote. In Arizona, the great thing is if you are a first-time felon, then your civil rights are automatically restored upon completion of your sentence and payment of any fines or restitution that you may have. So that means that you don't have to petition to get your civil rights restored, and you can just go ahead and register to vote once you've met those requirements. So how do you get your ballot? Arizona has a lot of options for voters, which is great. We have actually a very great system here in Arizona. Other states look to our systems because it provides a lot of options for voters. So we have a little over 4 million registered voters in the state right now. So it's important that voters can get their ballot in a manner that is convenient for them, but also safe and secure. So you can vote by mail. You can get your ballot mailed to you. And if that's something that you think you're going to do permanently, you can join what's called the active early voting list. And it means every election you're eligible to vote in, the county is going to automatically mail you that form or that ballot. And you don't even have to ask for it, because what you're doing is you're signing up for the active early voting list saying, yes, I will vote in all these upcoming elections and I will vote early by mail. So please automatically send it to me. When you do that, you have to make sure that you sign the early ballot affidavit envelope, because that's how we verify your identity. That's how we make sure you are who you say you are and that you are the person who should be voting that ballot. Or you can vote in person. You can either vote early in advance of election day. You can go to an on-site early voting location, or you can vote on Tuesday, election day. And what you need to do is bring your ID with you. So at that point, if you're going in person, you always have to show the poll worker your ID. And again, that's how we confirm your identity. So you can register to vote now. You can go online and verify your registration. Let's say you've moved. Let's make sure we have your current address, or you've had a name change, or you want to change your political affiliation. Now's a great time to go ahead and do it. What better way than to celebrate National Civics Learning Week than by verifying your voter registration or becoming a registered voter. And again, you decide how you want to vote when it's time for an election, and you can either vote by mail or you can vote in person. So when it is time to vote, how do you know what to vote for? How do you know what's on your ballot? How do you know where those voting locations are if you're going to vote in person? And how you know is you go to azcleanelections.gov. And I can promise you, I can guarantee you that that website has everything that you need to know to participate in that upcoming election. It will tell you if it's a city election. It'll tell you if there's a county election. It will tell you what's on the ballot, what candidates are running. Here's their profile. Here's their social media links. It will tell you if there's ballot measures, if there's propositions. It'll tell you what those propositions are. If you're not sure if you have the right ID, we've got a tool for you where you can answer a few questions and we'll let you know. If you just really want to identify, okay, where does this candidate stand on this issue? And you know, does it align with my views? We've got a candidate compass quiz that you can take to do that. If you want to know, how is my ballot counted? How can I verify that who I voted for, that vote actually went to the right person, to the right bucket? We have information about how elections work. We talk about election security. We can, again, talk about how government works. So let's say you want to do a little bit more research on what an Arizona Supreme Court justice does. We have that information for you on our website. We have information on civics, on how you can get more civically engaged. We have resources for our military and overseas voters, our voters who maybe may be experiencing homelessness right now and they don't have a permanent address and they want to learn how to get their ballot. We have all of this information for you at azcleanelections.gov. Again, it's basically the one website that you need to remember, and it will get you everything that you need so you can vote in that upcoming election. So as we talked about, to be civically engaged, you can vote. That's one way. That's fantastic to do it, but it's not the only way. So if you want to be engaged, because again, civic education and civic engagement, it's about your community. So you can volunteer. You can volunteer at any local community-based organization, whether there's a food drive, right, or you know, reading to children or the elders. There's opportunities for engagement within your community. You can, again, stay in touch and contact and communicate with your elected officials to tell them how you feel about the issues. You can start a petition if you're looking for a movement, or you can mobilize for issues that are important to you or causes that are important to you. You can join a campaign. Let's say maybe you want to join a candidate's campaign because you support them, or a ballot measure campaign. You can do that. You can organize rallies and marches and demonstrations. You can attend a city council meeting, or you can watch it online. Again, you can go to these public meetings and have your voice be heard. So there's a lot of ways for you to be engaged with your community, aside from voting, but of course we love voting too. So please get out and vote, but of course you have other ways that you can participate and activate in your community. So we've talked about our different levels of government. We've talked about how our elections work and how you can get involved. So let's jump into how can we help you when you're at home and you're having these conversations about politics or community issues, social issues with your friends and family. So, one of the things we were talking about when we were preparing for this webinar is, we no longer seem to be the society that shies away from talking politics at the dinner table. Right now, you can't escape it. So Avery is going to share some great information with you all so that we can hopefully help you as you go through this process of civil discourse. So Avery, I'll turn it over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gina, for that spectacular overview. Let me go ahead and gear up the slide here. Just like this. Okay. There we go. All right. So as Gina mentioned, there was a time when talking about politics and things like that was considered taboo. And I would say that to a certain degree, it still is, but we talk about politics one way or another anyway. So today we're going to give you some tips that you could use to talk with your family, friends, and neighbors. So first, what is civil discourse? Civil discourse is a conversation where different viewpoints are exchanged, and it's not a contest, but it's intended to encourage mutual understanding, right? And why do we need civil discourse? There's plenty of reasons. Some of those are so we can maintain our relationships with our friends, family, and neighbors through our civil discourse. It ensures that we remain close even though we may disagree on an issue. It allows us to work with our coworkers who may disagree on issues and not let any bad feelings create a toxic work environment, right? Civil discourse also allows us to bring clarity to those areas where we do disagree. Some other things that civil discourse does is it also provides for us to have a healthy society, because a healthy society relies on the exchange of goods and ideas, right? The goal of this type of conversation is to find common ground and not to create a conflict. So this is not an argument. This is just to find common ground. Civil conversations are meant to remove barriers and not to create them, right? It's a conversation that rather than getting stuck on disagreements, it's used to stimulate creative solutions and plausible alternatives. So what isn't civil discourse? I think we all can kind of identify what isn't civil discourse, but here's a list of some things that you may have seen that are not civil. Being disrespectful is definitely not engaging in civil discourse. Using profanity, that's not necessarily being civil. Name calling is not civil discourse. Derogatory terms, calling people names, not civil discourse. Shouting and yelling at the person you're talking to or in a conversation with, that's not civil. Insulting body language like eye rolling, insulting tone of voices, any baby talk or speaking down to a person, any open hostility, any biting sarcasm, any ad hominem attacks or attacks on a person's persona instead of a position they're maintaining, any threats, and any attempt to influence someone's opinion or behavior is not civil discourse. And I'll say that again, an attempt to influence someone's opinion or behavior is not civil discourse. This is not a debate or argument, although arguments are not instinctively negative. It could be positive, but this isn't that. A civil discourse is just to find common ground, understanding, and to give you clarity on where you may disagree. So why is civil discourse difficult? So civil discourse is difficult in person because it's our human nature to get upset or angry and have emotional reaction when we hear something that we don't like. But it's best to take a step back and think about the situation from a different perspective. Why is it so challenging on the internet? Well, the internet and social media, flat out breeding grounds for emotional outbursts, for gaslighting, for trolls. And that's because people feel free to say whatever they want without having to face the actual person they're talking to. So there are some benefits to having civil discourse online. If you want to go there, you could do real-time fact checking. It's at your fingertips. So if someone says something you disagree with or you don't think is sure or correct, you can look it up. It's possible for you to take a break and create a civil response. If someone says something that frustrates you, they may antagonize you. You don't have to respond right away. You can take a minute and think about something, more polite way to say it. And the conversation can also be ended at any time without feeling awkward. It's different when you're in front of a person and if you just turn and walk away, but online, you could actually just not respond. Something that I like to do when I get in a little conversation on Facebook and I think Twitter is you could silence the notifications. So you make your comment and you don't want to go back to it, just silence those notifications. Peace of mind there. There's a few myths about civil discourse. First myth, civil discourse means compromising on what you believe and being bipartisan. It does not. You do not need to compromise on anything to engage in civil discourse. All civil discourse means is that you're standing up for whatever you believe in without calling your opponent names or mocking their beliefs. Next myth, civil discourse means not criticizing positions you disagree with. That is absolutely wrong. You are perfectly entitled to criticize a political position you think is incorrect, but you shouldn't dwell into hyperbole or misrepresent their beliefs. Next myth, you have to avoid certain politicians and pundits in order to engage in civil debate. That is false. In civil discourse, we reject behaviors, not people. Although it is true that there are some people in politics who engage in name calling, character, and mocking, and we should condemn those people when those actions occur. And this is a bonus slide. This goes to what Gina mentioned about communicating with your public officials and legislators. In order to advance public interest, constructive dialogue and civil discourse are necessary. So a few things you can do is make sure to introduce yourself, including where you live, work, or teach, and what the issue you would like to discuss. Kind of personalize your email or your call. Be concise. Legislators and public officials are really busy, and you are not the only person that they have to talk to. So keep it about 15, 20 minutes as a courtesy. And answer any questions that are asked of you. But if you can't answer the question, just politely let them know that you'll get back to them with the information. And finally, be sure to send a follow-up letter, a thank you letter, repeating some of the points that were made during the meeting, and make sure to make good on any promise that you had to provide more information about any issue. So here is why we're here for the tips. So these are some civil discourse tips. Don't be afraid to initiate discussion with someone who seems open and genuine. So someone seems approachable, that's the perfect person to initiate discussion with. If another person uses personal attacks, if they're aggressive or they think they know it all, just walk away. Just walk away. It's not worth to argue with somebody. And someone said, I don't know who said this, but be careful with arguing with someone who's ignorant, because from a distance, people can't tell who's who. When a civil discussion is not possible, it's best to accept that fact and just move on. Agree that you both want to gain more perspective from the conversation. Find a point of agreement to start a conversation. Most of us are Arizonans. Something I like to say, we both can agree that we both want to see Arizona succeed, or we both care about Arizona as a community or as a state. Make sure you listen without interrupting. So that's very important, to make sure you're listening to the person that you're speaking with and you're not trying to overtalk them. You can also ask genuine, open-ended questions without being snarky or facetious. Just what makes you believe that? What evidence do you have that makes you say that? And it's just so you get, it's not to argue with them, but you just want more insight on why they're saying what they're saying. Another thing is you can take a moment before responding. This is a courtesy, and it lets the other person know that you're actually considering what they're saying. You're not just shooting off right after they say something. Another thing you could do is ask for equal time. So if you're not able to get a word in, you could politely ask, may I finish my point? And you can interject. More civil discourse tips. So you can be mindful of your facial expression and tone. I'm not sure the number, but I think it's over 80% of communication comes from body language. So be conscious of your facial expressions and your tone of voice. Control your emotional response. It's going to take practice, but you're going to have to control your emotional response. Sometimes you're going to have to think about stuff before you can craft an intelligent response. So That's important. You want to acknowledge valid points. When you're talking to someone and you're both making valid points, you should both say, I agree with that. I do agree with that. Just to let them know that, you're having a reciprocative conversation. When people criticize or they disagree with your ideas, they're not attacking you personally. So don't take it personal. It's just the idea that they disagree with or they don't understand. Bottom line, be polite and respectful of others. There's two words that I like to use when discussing civil discourse, and that's empathy and humility. You're going to want to only focus on one issue at a time. Otherwise, the conversation gets too convoluted. Repeat what the other person has said in their own words. This is something to let them know that you're listening and understand what they've said. Let the person know this is not a debate. It's not a debate. No one is going to win. This is not an argument. No, there's no persuasion. This is just a conversation for insight. Cultural differences should always be taken into consideration. We all come from different places, different backgrounds. So we always got to take that into consideration. And we do that by maybe putting ourselves in other people's shoes. Respectfully ask for evidence that supports statements that have been made. Someone says something that just you've never heard before, just ask for evidence for it. And then know when to stop. Know when to stop. Don't get involved in a conversation where your emotions are getting high or you're getting upset. I mean, you're going to have to know that you're going to have to stop the conversation. So what is the aftermath of civil discourse? So after you've had civil discourse, after you get good at it anyway, when you walk away from a civil conversation, you're going to have a greater awareness of the perspective of others. You're going to have knowledge of complex issues. You're going to have an interest in further research, and you're going to have confidence to continue having these tough conversations with people who may or may not have different beliefs than you do. So in a nutshell, that is how we do civil discourse. And you got to remember that no one is a villain in their own mind. So when you're speaking with someone, they're not going to immediately see your side of your point of view because they're not going to think they're wrong. So it's going to take practice. It's going to take practice. And after that, that is my slide. So if there are any questions, this is the time that any questions from the audience.
That was great, Avery. Thank you. You know, something I'll chime in. Something that you said really stood out to me about what civil discourse is not, and that's, you know, trying to actually change somebody's opinion. I think that's really important because if I know you're coming at me to change what I think are my beliefs, what I believe to be right, I'm going to be pretty defensive. So, you know, I may not be open to listening to you because I know you just want to change what I think. But if I think that you really just want to understand me and think, you know, why I feel this way about a particular issue, I will be more open to having, you know, a civilized conversation with you. And I think that was, you know, something really important that stood out to me of what you said. It's not a debate. No one's going to win here. It's about being respectful. And I think really that's how you get to creating solutions. So
Absolutely.
Thank you. Those were great tips. So with that, you know, this brings us near the end of our webinar here for National Civic Learning Week. A few things that we'll leave you with is Avery and I and the Clean Election staff, we are available to come and have presentations and conversations with your organization, or, you know, again, if you're just an individual, we're happy to answer any questions that you maybe have. You can contact Clean Elections. Again, if you go to our website, azcleanelections.gov, we'll have an email there for you, and you can reach out to us with any questions that you have about how government works, or how elections work, or how you can vote in the upcoming election. And you know, this video will be available on YouTube. And so if you're an educator, you know, it's a great opportunity. You can, you know, trim it and show your students certain sections if you want to teach them about, you know, how state government works, or, you know, voting. And we actually do, again, if educators out there, we have a wonderful civics curriculum that Clean Elections has developed. It fully meets state standards. So it's a great opportunity for you to utilize these resources that we've prepared. And with that, you know, we want to thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching the video.